For centuries, the Great Pyramid of Giza has beckoned travelers and adventurers alike. While the relentless attention has taken its toll on this majestic structure, it has also gifted us with a rich collection of historical accounts detailing its evolving state. I find immense joy in delving into the writings of those who journeyed to Giza long ago. It's like stepping back in time, sharing in the very wonder and astonishment experienced by those who witnessed the pyramids before the advent of photography. When exploring the Great Pyramid, it's tempting to focus solely on the physical evidence we see today. After all, tangible remains seem more compelling than the words of strangers. Yet Khufu's pyramid has endured so much dramatic transformation over thousands of years that relying solely on present-day evidence can easily lead to false conclusions. To truly grasp the mysteries of the Giza Plateau, one must first delve into the historical records, a task often fraught with challenges. Navigating a labyrinth of past exploratory missions, many documented in obscure and elusive sources, can be discouraging. For instance, the book Giza and the Pyramids, The Definitive History, includes a list of such missions, yet the scant information provided seems more like an academic flex than a genuine aid to fellow researchers. However, a thorough understanding of past accounts is crucial for any serious investigation of the Great Pyramid. This, in my view, is what separates casual enthusiasts from those with the potential for groundbreaking discoveries. Recently, Matt from Ancient Architects shared some exciting news about newly unearthed sources from the early 19th century. Stefan Bergdahl, an independent researcher, had uncovered two separate accounts from visitors to the Great Pyramid in March and April of 1837. During this time, priest Vicino and Prince Hermann von Puckler-Muskau both ventured inside the Great Pyramid, while Howard Weiss was excavating in the Queen's Chamber. Astonishingly, both men claimed to have witnessed a sarcophagus within the chamber. Having encountered countless erroneous historical accounts, I am usually skeptical of testimonies that contradict established knowledge. The Great Pyramid of centuries past was a far cry from the well-lit, accessible monument we know today. It was a treacherous place, filled with dampness, dust, obstacles, bats, and snakes. Illumination relied solely on the visitor's own light sources, making detailed observations difficult. The steep Grand Gallery posed a significant risk of serious injury or even death. However, when Matt presented the two independent accounts of a Queen's Chamber sarcophagus, recorded just weeks apart in 1837, while Howard Weiss was actively working inside, it sent shivers down my spine. Unlike some historians, I hold Weiss in high regard. His meticulous documentation of his work at the Giza Plateau was unprecedented, predating Flinders Petrie, the so-called father of Egyptology, by 44 years. Regardless of one's opinion of Weiss's methods, he established a modern standard for excavation documentation. Sadly, numerous subsequent excavations, while perhaps gentler in their approach, suffered from poor or non-existent documentation. The chambers of Djedefre's pyramid, for example, remain shrouded in mystery due to the lack of published records from a modern excavation, resulting in the loss of almost all evidence. While Weiss was not without his errors, his contributions remain invaluable. The Great Pyramid has suffered its share of damage over time, from the gaping hole on its southern side to the ruined floor in Khafre's burial chamber. Taking the sarcophagus from Menkare's pyramid also proved to be an unfortunate decision, as it vanished into the sea. When reflecting on Weiss's work, it seemed less like the actions of a malicious person and more like someone managing a massive project with limited resources. Therefore, Stefan Bergdahl's theory about Weiss hiding a secret Queen's Chamber sarcophagus didn't convince me. Yet the accounts of two contemporary witnesses, both claiming there was one, presented a perplexing situation. The idea of a Queen's Chamber sarcophagus has always been appealing, as it would support the theory of the chamber being a potential burial site. One historical mention comes from Al-Adrezi in the 13th century, but the centuries between his account and later reports allowed for the explanation of its disappearance due to destruction by visitors. Initially, it seemed possible that a sarcophagus could have been removed from the tunnel within the niche, since visitors before Weiss didn't see it. However, finding it under the floor in a pit dug by Weiss seemed unlikely, as he didn't excavate the tunnel in the center of it. This led to examining Giovanni Caviglia's work, who was excavating the Great Pyramid about 20 years before Howard Weiss. Caviglia, captivated by ancient Egypt, dedicated his life to digging and seeking funding, enduring harsh conditions that eventually led to his death. Unlike Weiss, Caviglia prioritized discovery over documentation. When Weiss arrived in Egypt in 1837, he hired Caviglia but later dismissed him for neglecting assigned tasks and digging in mummy pits. It's conceivable that Caviglia had excavated a sarcophagus from the Queen's Chamber tunnel before Weiss's arrival, potentially explaining its existence. While its disappearance remained a mystery, it seemed like a starting point. Despite Caviglia's lack of publishing, he collaborated with Henry Salt, England's consul general to Egypt around 1815. An article in Antiquities of Egypt Quarterly Review, Volume 19, detailed Caviglia's excavations, including a portrait of him by Henry Salt. However, Salt explicitly stated that Caviglia found nothing in the Queen's Chamber niche tunnel except the graffiti of 2 European names. Caviglia also cleared the rubble in the Queen's Chamber itself, ruling out the possibility of a sarcophagus being there all along. With this explanation eliminated, the idea of pulling a sarcophagus from below the floor seemed illogical, as did the notion of Weiss secretly disposing of it. In Weiss's time, a plain limestone sarcophagus wouldn't have been considered a significant find, especially since the Giza plateau was filled with them. An undecorated limestone box wouldn't have been worth stealing, even from the Great Pyramid. After countless hours of research, contacting ancient architects for new primary sources from Vicino and Puckler Moscow proved fruitful. Reading Vicino's own words clarified the situation. To visitors of the Great Pyramid in 1837, the squared masonry in the Queen's Chamber niche excavation would have resembled a sarcophagus. Imagine being told there's a king's chamber and a queen's chamber. In the king's chamber, you see the sarcophagus, with the hole almost underneath it and excavations underway. Entering the Queen's Chamber, one might anticipate finding a royal burial chamber. However, the room's most prominent features are a niche, a squared cavity within it, and the marks left by Howard Weiss's team during their excavation. Initially, it's easy to dismiss the cavity as simply an unconventional sarcophagus. The connection between the cavity and a supposed sarcophagus only becomes clear through a careful analysis of Vicino's descriptions. He described a sarcophagus inside the niche, smaller in size, crafted from marble, open and unadorned, with an excavation beneath it and a tunnel above. These details align with the physical characteristics of the squared cavity. One could even speculate that knocking on the cavity's walls might produce a hollow sound, echoing through a long, connecting tunnel, as Vicino noted. Such misinterpretations, however, are not unprecedented within the Great Pyramid. Even Flinders Petrie, a leading expert, once mistook a granite leaf in the portcullis chamber for an unused portcullis slab, despite its construction from 2 separate blocks, making it impossible to lower without breaking. In the dimly lit past before the 20th century, a meticulous examination of every detail was not always feasible. The human element of error played its part. Another perplexing misidentification came from Charles Piazzi Smith, a 19th century scholar. Smith, an important resource, repeatedly referred to the granite plugs in the ascending corridor as a portcullis. This choice of words caused confusion while I worked on my video, describing the granite fragments of the destroyed portcullis. Now, with the Queen's Chamber sarcophagus connection in mind, it's easier to understand how others might have made similar errors. Even though Al-Idrisi described the King's Chamber sarcophagus and Queen's Chamber sarcophagus as being similar during the 13th century, this similarity is not enough to counter Vicino's description. Similar could mean anything, squared off or large enough to hold a body. In all probability, it was the same misidentification. While solving this mystery was both thrilling and disappointing, it also ended the hope of ever finding a Queen's Chamber sarcophagus. Unless new evidence emerges that definitively distinguishes a sarcophagus from the niche cavity, the assumption remains that they are the same. Honesty in the face of evidence can lead to unexpected conclusions. Yet mysteries persist, such as the squared section of masonry within the Queen's Chamber niche that extends for several meters. Its unusual construction has intrigued explorers for centuries. Architect Gilles Dormion was so fascinated by the squared niche excavation that he proposed the existence of hidden tunnels or chambers beneath it, a central theme in his book, The Chamber of Cheops. While Dormion's work offers unique insights, his theories may be a bit too ambitious. While 3 books have posited the tantalizing idea of undiscovered chambers within the pyramids, a notion many find improbable, the persistence of unexplained anomalies keeps the mystery alive. The late priest Facino, for instance, speculated that Weiss's pit in the Queen's Chamber floor might itself be a separate chamber, hinting at hidden, squared masonry. However, the discovery of a tunnel extending 55 feet into the niche by earlier explorers reminds us that squared masonry doesn't automatically signify a secret room. Intriguingly, Weiss documented finding desert sand in his excavations, both near the Queen's Chamber step and beneath the chamber niche. This mirrors Gilles Dormien's 1986 excavation in the corridor leading to the Queen's Chamber, where 3 drill cores extracted from the wall revealed sand remarkably different from the local Giza desert variety. The repeated discovery of this unusual sand across 3 separate digs near the Queen's Chamber suggests a pattern. Re-excavating Howard Weiss's pit in the Queen's Chamber floor to search for the same anomalous sand found in the horizontal corridor seems a worthwhile endeavor. Ancient architects would likely agree that such a minimally invasive procedure wouldn't damage the pyramid's original structure. While it is unlikely the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities would embark on a quest for a hidden tomb, a proper scientific inquiry might hold more appeal. A compelling Queen's Chamber theory exists, one that potentially explains the sand, cavities, and various other anomalies. Consider photographs taken in the Queen's Chamber more than a century ago, the most famous being one taken by the Edgar brothers for their 1910 book, The Great Pyramid Passages, Volume 1. After scrutinizing details regarding Weiss and Caviglia's work in the Queen's Chamber, the niche's appearance appears strange. It appears as if the tunnel is entirely filled, with debris spilling out. But how could that be if the tunnel extends 55 feet deep? A new interpretation suggests the niche looks as it does because of how Howard Weiss concluded his work in the Queen's Chamber. After completing his exploratory digs and refilling them, he, like a Victoria-era English gentleman, had the floor swept clean. He piled the remaining loose debris at the niche cavity entrance, with the larger blocks left on the floor below. Thus, the tunnel isn't entirely filled. Rather, the entrance is simply covered, serving as the closest disposal point for rubble and sand. A slight shifting of the debris hinted that for the better part of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the narrow tunnel remained untouched. Gaining access would have been relatively straightforward, merely requiring the removal of some loose material, yet it lay undisturbed for decades. This observation serves as a compelling parallel to how the Great Pyramid was likely perceived throughout time. Extended periods of inactivity punctuated by short bursts of intense exploration. The pyramid's interior, a decidedly unwelcoming environment for much of its existence, demanded significant motivation for thorough examination. We owe a debt of gratitude to pioneers such as Weiss, Paring, and Petrie, whose meticulous efforts in recent times have provided invaluable insight into the evidence that could be unearthed within the pyramid over the past 200 years. And rest assured, mysteries still await discovery within its ancient walls.